gentlemen, welcome. I trust I find you all safe and well in these continued extraordinary times. With the cancellation of the Toronto conference due to the global pandemic, the BCO has managed to salvage the best parts of the conference agenda and put together a trilogy of webinars under the title The Office Reimagined. Last week, we heard from the Canadian developers and disruptors with a session moderated skillfully by Chuck Scott of Cushman Wakefield. Today, I'm delighted to say that we will be able to hear from the Canadian Occupier and what they have to say in this webinar titled Beyond Real Estate, the Occupier's View. Before I introduce you to your moderator and speakers, I'd like to personally thank the gold and silver sponsors on behalf of the BCO who have so generously supported my program and sponsored this webinar series. The gold sponsors are BDP Quadrangle, Gleeds, Lutron, Skanska, Troop by Waters and Anders, Hare and WSP. And the silver sponsors are Darling Associate Architects, Hawley, HDR Hurley Palmer Flat, Overbury, UNI and Wembley Park. Their unequivocal support during these testing times has been truly remarkable, and we at the BCO are truly grateful. It is with their support that the BCO can continue with its great work delivering best-in-class office specifications and requirements for offices both now and in the future. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the plenary panel to you. Chris Testy is a Principal Director at TP Bennett Architects in the UK. He has kindly offered to moderate our esteemed panel of speakers for the second webinar in this series. Joining Chris and representing the occupiers are Sheila Botting, President of Professional Services for Avison Young across the Americas and formerly Senior Partner and Canadian Real Estate Leader for Deloitte LLP. And we also have Lisa Chang, Vice President of the Global Portfolio for Royal Bank of Canada. Chris and ladies, it is an honor to have you with us. I'd like to now hand you over to Chris to moderate this exciting session, which we will hopefully lead to some provocative questions at the end of the Q&A session. Over to you, Chris.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction, Robin. And I would say it's a pleasure to be in this meeting room in London, where we should all be on the beautiful city of Toronto, doing this face-to-face. But we live in extraordinary and unprecedented times, and this is an example of how the show must and does go on in the face of adversity, in the face of unpredictability, and in the face of the biggest challenge that the Western world has arguably faced since the Second World War. Whilst I invite the BCO team to please fire up a couple of introductory slides, I'd also like to extend my thanks to absolutely everyone who's joined us. I know that these extraordinary times we live in often means our days are back to back, one call to the next with barely the time to get up and have a cup of coffee. So we really do appreciate your continued support and dedication to the BCO. And also I'd like to extend my thanks to Sheila and Lisa, who I will introduce shortly in a little bit more detail, who have agreed to join this panel. So just a set of very little bit of context before I hand over to our two expert guests. On the next page, I think we have all recognized that this year that we've been through has been the biggest ever flexible working pilot. It's not a pilot that we asked for, that we implemented, it's a pilot that has been forced upon us, but it's been a fantastic opportunity, next please, to learn things. I think we've all observed how COVID has been an accelerator rather than a game changer. Technology, the war for talent, the evolution of the face of business, macro changes in societies and the generations have set in motion a series of trends over the last decade, again, arguably since the 2008 crisis, that have refocused our aspirations and our attention into a different sphere and a different way of doing things. And COVID has taken that dial, cranked it up to 11 and accelerated and pushed those changes through and piloted them in a different way. Next, please. But what have we learned? Clearly, we're still fresh. We're still actively going through the pandemic and the new ways of working, the new ways of doing business that have been thrust upon us. How do we come out of it looking fresh, looking strong, and ready to face the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead? On the next page, I've highlighted a few of the I guess warning signs. This is research we've carried out over the past year, and a few headlines. 41% of people apparently felt their career development had stalled or gone backwards. I think particularly amongst the younger generations who have missed that learning by osmosis that you get when you're in the office with other people. Being stuck at home on days on end, maybe in cramped situations, maybe on your own. Apparently 3 times of people have described their mental health as poor at some point during the course of the pandemic. So clearly there's potentially a crisis waiting to happen on that we absolutely must address as occupiers, as responsible members of the business community and of society. Interestingly, 81% apparently said they were prepared to commute 30 minutes more. We've seen certainly in London, we've seen a move towards outer parts of the region, more people moving to places like Brighton, Cambridge and Oxford, choosing to balance work-home life in a different way and being prepared to travel slightly longer on the assumption that their days in the office will be short. So that's some of the sort of broad context. And on the next few pages, I'd like to just explore a few of the themes that we've observed from some of the occupiers we work with. So there is the idea that the HQ is now a destination. It's not an obligation. It's not somewhere you're compelled to go, but it's somewhere that you want and need to go to collaborate and interact with your colleagues and clients in a different way. The second point looks at the idea of movement and choice through buildings. So creating spaces that are full of amenities, full of a rich palette of places where you can do your work, whether it's collaborative, but also whether it's focused and concentrated, and creating an ecosystem of spaces, of which the home is absolutely a part, that enable different people who are wired in different ways to thrive in their careers and to add value to their businesses. The third trend we've observed is the idea of the amenity-led workspace. And for years now, leading occupiers have been peppering their space with great food and beverage, facilities that enhance fitness and wellness, elements of hospitality and retail and brand experience being increasingly brought into the workplace as it becomes a showcase and a hub. And we're going to see this a lot more. And this will be an interesting point, I think, for Sheila and Lisa to discuss in terms of how developers and real estate providers react to this third trend. The fourth trend, this crisis over the last year has been one about public health, and health and well-being has absolutely been thrown into the spotlight. The importance of a well group of people who are healthy, who are well, who are happy has been absolutely important. And with that come all the aspects around sustainability, both social and environmental, that needs to be weaved into the fabric of real estate in a sort of commercial and urban context. The fifth point is a few of the key things around commuting. Now, some people may commute from further out. A lot of people have seized this opportunity to ditch the tube, ditch the light rail, ditch the bus, leave their car at home and jump on their bike. It's a healthier, more sustainable way of travel. And it's just one of the many ways that people can navigate an urban environment. Who knows if and what the revolution around electric scooters, for example, may bring. Will electric vehicles substantially change the face of the urban environment? Who knows? But there are lots of things that we can explore and capitalize on. And the sixth point is a few of the sort of key points that people have asked for in surveys and in interacting with their landlords and with their real estate teams. Everything from flexible space to indoor air quality and the integration of both green technology and smart building technology into real estate. So without further ado, I'd like to go to the next and final element of this, just to welcome our panelists. So Robin, again, thank you for introducing Sheila and Lisa. Just a couple more words. Sheila's led a number of prestigious teams in her current and previous position at Deloitte, and is regarded as one of the go-to real estate advisors in the Americas. And Lisa, and as her title suggests, is responsible for the entire global portfolio at RBC and will bring very much a personal and corporate perspective to the conversation today. Lisa and Sheila are going to shortly talk to us for a few minutes. And then after that, we'll have a facilitated discussion amongst the three of us, which will hopefully prompt all of you to fire up the Q&A and send questions. And we'll conclude with a few pertinent questions addressed to the panelists. So without further ado, thank you all again. And I'd love to hand over to Sheila for your contribution to this discussion, please. Thank you, Sheila.
Thanks so much, Chris. I'm now going to share my screen directly because I have lots of great eye candy to be able to also share, thoughts and perspectives with respect to workplace. And thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to talk about workplace, our views, the future, and what we're seeing across the Americas and certainly globally in this current pandemic and post-pandemic world. Here in Toronto, for those of you who don't know, we're in lockdown yet again as the third wave hits our city. And so that's really heightened a lot of the trends and issues that we're seeing as we've been doing this for a year. And emerging from this is what everybody's very excited about, that opportunity. So just to build on what Chris talked about, the COVID-19 is accelerating any of the challenges that we had in workplace before the pandemic. What it's really doing for most enterprises is allowing them to embrace the digital transformation, taking advantage of the fourth industrial revolution, embedding digital processes within their business, certainly now that we're all working remote. And that is very much a requirement, and moving beyond paper-based processes. What we found was it was the paper and that intensification that tied people to their physical office. So as we move, it's a tremendous opportunity. As Chris was just saying, we've been in the largest pilot project globally, the largest change management project globally. And what all employees and employers have understood is that work is what you do, not necessarily where you can do it. And so therefore, for the employee, we've said to ourselves, if I can work from anywhere, why would I bother going to the office? And yet we all know that the office as a location is a really important tool of business and enabler of organizational change, as really crucial in the war for talent. So when people say to me, is the office dead? Absolutely not. But then the question becomes, what is the role of the office for today and in the future? And so as we work with our clients, we look at the distribution of work, and this is really a framework that allows you to wrap your head around some of the issues. So some of that work would take place in the office, whether it's downtown or suburban or a nearshore location. And other parts of it can be distributed, whether that's onshore, offshore, nearshore, whether we use digital AI robotics or whether it's outsourced. So all of us today are largely distributed. We're quite able to work anywhere we like. But the trick is managing both the physical and virtual interactions and dialing up or dialing down how those interactions take place. And it's really understanding that in order to come up with the workplace of the future designs. At the same time, Avis & Young has our incredible Avant platform, and we look at the recovery index for the major cities around the world. So for the purpose of this conversation, we're looking at the recovery of Toronto. And what this does is we use our mobility data to understand where people are in the city and what does that look like at various locations. So you can see down the left-hand bar, we picked, Toronto City Hall, the St. Lawrence Market, a hotel, and, a big office tower downtown. And what we found with that mobility data is that we're only recovered 4.5% from before the pandemic. So what this really means is that our office buildings today are virtually empty. Our transportation corridors, the transit, the subway, the GO trains and all the rest are only at 90-95%, vacancy in terms of the utilization of those. So people are not literally coming downtown. So the question is, what do we do to get people to come back downtown? What is it going to take? Yes, it's a vaccine. Yes, it's health and wellness. And yes, it's security. But there's also those intangible elements that now that I'm working from home, I'm actually quite happy today. Thank you very much. And yes, I do want to go downtown. But the question is, does that happen every day? And so as a result of those trends, what we're seeing is that the return to a future of work requires a whole new way of looking at the challenge and the opportunity. We've learned that flex work is very much happening. It's desirable, it's feasible, and a crucial ingredient in the war for talent. And so as you look at the distribution, in the old days, we'd have a traditional downtown headquarters, and we today we're fully distributed. What most of our clients are is landing somewhere in between, whether it's a hub and spoke model or just one central hub. And so in those solutions, it could involve some kind of a flex office solution, a WeWork, a Regis, or any of the flex office workers, and working remotely from home along with the central hub location. And so as you think about the central hub and what that looks like and how to attract workers back to the office, Leesman did an incredible survey during March that they released. They looked at 200,000 respondents around the world, and they asked people, when you do return to the office, what does that look like? Well, only 15% said that they would return full-time, 4 to 5 days a week. Another 48% said 2 to 3 days a week, and 37% said they may go in 1 day a week or less. And so what that's telling us is that a large proportion of people are today saying they do not want to return to their traditional offices. Yet on the right-hand side, they looked at a case organization and they looked at different buildings. They have the LMI score, which I think is absolutely fascinating. Those with the higher score have a better workplace experience. And those with a lower score, of course, not as good experience. So you can see on the top chart on the right-hand side, building 1, those workers that had a better workplace, 43% said they'd go back 4 days a week, and another 22% said that they would go more than 4 days a week. So what this is really indicating is the kind of workplace you develop, based on what Chris has also just referred to, means that it will entice people to come back into the office. What we know is that our traditional cube farms, aka the example on our left, is not going to be one of those types of locations to attract people. And I think many people have discovered that that kind of environment is really all about heads down individual work. Whereas if I can do my heads down individual work from my home office or somewhere else, why would I physically go to a central location or to an office building? We went to the other extreme on the open plan to the next one down the middle, and people also did not like that prior to COVID. They found that the open plan, when Harvard and MIT did research, they found there was a 67% increase in email traffic and people weren't engaging with each other. What's emerging is the dynamic work environment on the right-hand side with many different kinds of settings so that people can embrace a more agile digital way of working. And so it's really about accelerating and creating those agile environments that really focus in on the human experience, using all the key tools in technology, flex office, workplace, and all kinds of solutions to build a profitable strategy. If you get this right as an organization, you can do 2 things. You can reduce your footprint and therefore your real estate costs. But more important than that is you can absolutely increase your employee and a human experience and drive productivity. The business case is solid as you take this approach in the right way. And so these dynamic designs, as Chris mentioned, is that they're all about hubs to allow flexible work options. It's about embracing a whole list of priorities from innovation and dynamic design that's not the old cube farm, but has fun and dazzle in the workplace. Embracing health and wellness, ESG, sustainability, technology for smart workplaces, so you can have booking systems to either book your meeting room or individual space, or do COVID tracking, building into smart buildings and cities. And the last and perhaps the most important topic is around diversity and inclusion. And yes, of course, it includes both gender and cultural diversity, but in the sense of a business opportunity, when you remove all of the silos and you remove the barriers, suddenly different teams with different technical backgrounds and skills can get together and collaborate, break down those barriers, allow the entire organization to solve problem X, Y, Z, or ABC. And so in these types of spaces that are designed, it includes a combination of individual, collaborative, and social spaces. And many of our clients are looking at the activity-based work environment because they recognize that assigning people to a desk may not be required if they're only in the office 2 days a week. So unlocking the potential here becomes really the opportunity. Of course, technology, office in a box. Before COVID, not all employers had laptops. Suddenly it was this huge requirement to bring laptops to make sure that we have connectivity, that we can all have a conversation today. And so how to unlock the potential is all about understanding the business. It's all about understanding the strategy, the operations, the goals, the aspirations, then the people and the talent, and how they would drive the business, the various work styles, whether we're processing documents or whether we're selling or whether we're in HR or legal, understanding the various work styles, then the technology. And the last thing is the real estate and the space. Understanding that full cycle as a management consultant, I understand that. That's how we approach most of our opportunities, but equally for folks understanding the workplace and the developers themselves on the buildings. Those companies that invest in the human experience can see a 4 times increase in profitability. We've seen it play out across the board, and the workplace provides a crucial ingredient toward that opportunity. I'd like to turn the stage now over to Lisa to share the RBC perspectives.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sheila. Thanks so much. Our presentations look like they were built together, and I can assure everyone that they weren't. You'll see a lot of the same themes. And thanks a lot for having me. I really wanted to take a moment today just to share a brief glimpse into what RBC's thinking relative to the workplace of the future. I'm going to share some slides in a moment. Really, we're a global company. We have about 25 million square feet comprised of office, retail, critical data centers, and our occupancy spend is about 1.6 billion annually. So not a small feat to manage a portfolio of this size and scale globally right now during the pandemic. It's been a very interesting year. And really right now we're in the midst of planning, building, and running for those engineers out there all at the same time. I'm going to ask that the slides get pulled up now, and I'll walk through and share a little bit of the journey and some of the hypotheses that we've developed. And really this is specific to our own internal real estate team. And we've developed these hypotheses based on a number of sessions, meetings, input that range from working with our service providers externally, meeting and having listening sessions with internal employees and pulse surveys, as well as industry experts throughout North America and globally. And we've pulled these together to help guide us as we start to build out what that future of work is going to look like for RBC employees in the physical space. The first being that, similar to what Sheila had referenced, this really is about focusing on experience. And that has always been a priority for us in the office spaces that we fit out, but even more so now. And I think specifically to collaboration and hospitality combined with technology. And so those were always important things. I don't want to discount the importance of them before, but now they're almost at the forefront of all of our plans. Similarly, with the adoption of hybrid work, seeing some of the previous stats on how many people are going to want to choose to work from home 2, 3, 4 days a week, we're developing a hybrid work model. And so we don't know yet what that means in terms of our space requirements. Getting into one of the bullets a little bit further down, it'll likely mean that we don't need as much space, maybe, depending on the design. I think we're going to move from much more heads down me space into primarily collaborative team we space. I think when people come into the office, they're going to come in and they're going to want to collaborate with one another. They're going to want to get into meeting rooms. They're going to want to have agile huddles. For heads down work, I believe employees are going to want to do that remotely and from home. We've proven that we can do it, and we've done it successfully. Another factor that comes up again and again is rates, rental rates. What direction are they heading in? Working closely with Cushman and our brokers, I mean, we're seeing rates are softening, but really it's not about savings and money. I think that rates may soften a little bit. Maybe that trend will continue. Really, we're coming off leases that are 5-10 years old. And so the rates are reflecting a very different time in the economy. This is more about volume. If there's a savings to be made, it would probably be around what markets, how much space is required. And that's something that we're exploring now. relative to better locations. Do we want to continue to have a presence in the suburbs? Do we have enough of a campus in the suburb to accommodate, given those locations typically have free parking? And commuting and transportation are going to be a really important factor, I think, heading into the future as offices start to reopen and the downtown core starts to reopen. Another big consideration for us is sustainability. It's a major corporate goal. We are incorporating sustainable goals into each of our real estate projects, and that's really a big factor for us as we start to look at how we're going to be fitting out spaces. And then the last point just really is around a test and learn. So I had previously said plan, build, and run. We're at a point in time right now where we really need to get people back into the office working to understand how is it that people want to work differently. I don't think it makes a ton of sense right now to spend millions and millions of dollars in CapEx fitting out spaces when really no one has the answer on the right solution and the right mix of space. So it's going to be an evolution for sure, testing, incorporating different kit of parts, taking out workstation runs and putting in collaborative agile desktops for teams to come and huddle. And I think that's going to continue to evolve over the next few years. Just getting into the next slide, I thought I would share with everyone RBC's collective ambition. And the workplace design and the functional evolution really is built on our collective ambition, and it's a journey. This is not new, the workplace, the evolution of work, activity-based work. We have spent a lot, we invest heavily in our workspaces because of that employee experience and how important it is to continue to retain highly engaged employees and attract talent. So just sharing with everyone the journey that RBC has been on in the past 10, 15 years, dating back to 2012, a workplace style we had called Reflections that was rolled out. And really that was the first open plan design, putting offices in the core and starting to increase the we space versus the I space. That led into 2017 and 2018, really evolving the agile workplace, having free addresses, developing a kit of parts with activity-based work. So we're well on our way to introduce mobility and free address at RBC. The last one is the smart buildings. This is pre-COVID, really starting to integrate building systems into the architecture and design of our buildings and our spaces. And we've done that effectively in one of our UK-based sites. So really the next generation nod on this is the workplace post-COVID. And that's what we're working on right now to start to evolve what that design and kit of parts will look like, how we're going to evolve the workplace of the future, which was primarily free address that we were starting to increase adoption within RBC and with the RBCers. So now we're at a place where what will that future look like? Just getting to the next slide, building on some of that collective ambition that I talked about, the importance of having a really clear vision and purpose for us is critical because it really is kind of our guiding star. Our vision is to be among the world's most trusted and successful financial institutions. And our purpose is to help clients thrive and communities prosper. And for us in the real estate group, you know, this is what we live and eat and breathe every day. The employee engagement, the talent acquisition, attraction and retention, making sure the spaces are fit out with effective technologies so that teams can collaborate, client first mentality, providing that workplace experience for employees that inspires them, simplify, agile and innovate. I mean, we've launched our agile workplace for our tech and design teams, and it's been tremendously received. Just making sure that that workplace is fit out to provide a different way that fosters innovation. That it's really what our employees have been asking for, and I don't think that that's going to go away post-COVID. In fact, I think it's going to be accelerated. Just moving on to the next slide, if we can. I wanted to provide a little bit of a from and a to perspective. And there's no timeline on this for a reason, because some of it is quite complex. And this is really our corporate real estate based from and to perspective. On the from side, our business units considered ownership of space. So they paid the rent and they owned the space that they live in. We're really moving to more of an enterprise space as a service model. That means that there's more mobile floors. Floors aren't necessarily dedicated to one team. Different business units can pop in, similar to a WeWork floor. They can book a seat and use that seat as needed, and they get charged on an as used basis. So this is something that we're starting to build out to test. Moving from dedicated seats to a variety of high performance activity-based settings versus just workstations. Moving away from efficiency as a driver and really honing in, working really closely with our HR colleagues who are leading the Future of Work program at RBC to understand the human performance and experience and what is going to be driving that moving forward to be most effective from a design perspective. Moving from fixed architecture to fluid, adaptable architecture. And finally, the standalone technologies, really having integrated systems, whether the systems are smart building related systems, systems that encourage people that are working from home, they still feel connected to their colleagues who may choose to go into the office on any given day. So these are the types of things that we're looking at in terms of the from and to as it pertains to the future of work at RBC. The next slide is really just simply what are some of the things that we're looking at from a hybrid model, and really it's the continuum that was discussed previously. On the left, dedicated seats that are in assigned office spaces. I don't think that's going to go away. There are going to be particular functions that are going to require that moving forward. And I think that will continue to exist all the way to the far right, which is individuals who are choosing to work entirely from home. And then everything in between, whether it's having desk sharing and mobile spaces in our office portfolios, having meeting in campus offices, so really allowing longer term bookable meeting areas, satellite and remote offices, working in a third place, and then somewhere in between. So folks that are looking to spend some time at home but want to come into the office 2, 3, maybe 4 days a week. So this is nothing new or shocking. This is really something that we're starting to evaluate in terms of understanding the demand for space and how the space that we're providing our employees needs to evolve. The next slide, really simply, is how are we going to be doing this from a real estate perspective? I've talked a little bit about HR and the importance of HR and technology. In terms of some of the tools that we're looking at deploying or have deployed already, one is a workplace effectiveness survey, and we've leveraged Leesman extensively pre-COVID, taking utilization stats, which is really helping us to inform post-COVID for our business units, helping them understand how they used to work and the fact that average utilization was about 60% on any given day, and helping them understand what that new workplace of the future could look like with more of a hybrid structure. The next is work profile assessments. So we are working very closely with our business units to help them understand what type of roles and functions need to be on site and which ones can continue to work effectively remotely. And then finally, different technologies that we're adopting to measure space utilization to start to help influence and help us understand ultimately the demand for space and the utilization and quality of that space. I think that was it for my slides and presentation. Happy to answer any questions, or I think we're going to open it up and do a bit of a roundtable for questions.
That's correct, and thank you very much, Lisa and Sheila, for your contributions. Really, really interesting to see all these different perspectives, and I think, as you both said, how cohesive this has been. Because we have met, we have talked about the event, but we haven't coordinated. So it's been deliberately left to all of us to come with our own contributions, and the fact that we're so aligned just shows that we are really facing similar challenges and similar opportunities globally. So I'd like to ask, I really like your comment actually, Lisa, about how space becomes a service. This is something we have been seeing before COVID. It's, I think, even more pertinent now in the sort of the wake of the pandemic. So the two parts of the question, and maybe one more for you, Lisa, and the second part more for Sheila, is there a disconnect between what occupiers are demanding and what occupiers are needing, and what the real estate providers and developers are geared up to sell. And maybe more for Sheila, if there's a case, if there is a disconnect, where is the line drawn? How far should the real estate provider go before the developer before the occupier then takes over? Is it a collaborative effort? Is it a relay race? Perhaps Lisa, if you could start giving us some thoughts on that, and maybe Sheila to back that up with some context.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's a really complex question, to be honest, because I think it really does depend on the portfolio that you have and the landlords that you're working with. For us specifically in the office environment, we're primarily working with large institutional landlords who are quite sophisticated. And we have been meeting with them through COVID once every 2 weeks and really sharing best practices. We are letting them know what it is that we need as it relates to health and safety as a priority. So as an example, right now we're working closely with some of our landlords to test health and safety certification by building, to really reinforce to our employees that, HVAC, air quality, cleaning, these are all completely top-notch and have been certified. So we've got the benefit of working with really strong real estate partners, landlords and developers that really translate what it is that we're looking for. Obviously, in some cases where you're in older legacy buildings, it's a little bit more difficult to do that. But, there's ways that we've been really creative about going about introducing things like smart building technologies in buildings that are 15, 20 years old, where it doesn't necessarily exist today. So I do feel like we're heading in the right direction. I also find our landlords are much more flexible right now. Are we going to be signing 10-year leases without termination rights? I don't know. I think for occupiers generally, that sentiment will likely change just because of the unknowns. There's just so many unknowns right now that will cause some hesitation to sign up for really long-term leases. So I do think we're going to see some of the variables in leases change as it relates to giving more flexibility to occupiers. And the landlords that we're working with are quite attuned to that and supportive. But Sheila, I'll hand it over to you. I think you'd probably have some perspective on this as well, for sure.
Sure. So I'll start kind of even in the pre-COVID world, where, and I'll say the real estate community in general, whether it's those of us on the service provider side, whether it's the architects, the engineers, the designers, even the building operators. If you think about it, our whole industry is positioned for the tenant, the occupier, to tell us what they want, right? And then we say, we can address what you want. Tell us what it is, and we can address that topic. We can come up with your space per FTE. We can design anything. The trick in this current world is that that's a very complex question. Right? What does the tenant and or the occupier want? And having led many of these large programs, when you think about the program itself on workplace and space, it involves, of course, at its base is human resources. What do the people want? What about the technology? What about innovation? What about sustainability? What about the operations? What about finance? Well, suddenly you're talking about an entire business that you've got to corral all of those various views and opinions and define that into a real estate requirement. That upfront piece is still taking place to be able to define it for the real estate piece. So that's kind of topic number one. Topic number two is in the development and the asset community. I think that there's a view among many folks that we're going to return to normal, right? We're going to return to working 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 or whatever the hours are, downtown or in an office building. And I think that, that's out of the barn, so to speak. That's not going to happen, in my view, anytime soon. So I think we really have to wrap our heads around both of those topics to then say, what does it mean for the real estate community? So as Lisa was saying earlier, vacancy rates are going up, sublet space is going up in Toronto, costs are coming off. And it's not necessarily about the dollar per square foot rental cost. It's about the total occupancy cost across the portfolio for an individual tenant and occupier. And so for the real estate community to wrap our heads around that, it's just going to take some time, and obviously addressing whatever it is that the occupier is articulating for us. long answer to a very complex question.
Absolutely, and I think it's something we'll continue to observe, the reaction from both occupiers and landlords changing and continuing to evolve. Just to take it on a slightly broader level then, obviously Lisa, you look after a global portfolio, and this is something a number of our global clients are grappling with in terms of how you create an element of consistency across a, I guess, corporate approach to workplace, and how you provide the same quality and the same experience to everyone. But obviously every region of the world, every country of the world, in some larger countries like the US and Canada, every city has got different nuances and different ways of working and different expectations. So I'm interested in seeing how you at RBC balance a desire for consistency across the portfolio with nuances of and regional variations.
Yeah, it's a great question. And definitely through COVID and the response phase, the variations globally became really apparent. COVID is so complicated, and so many various government regulations that were dictating what we needed to do as an enterprise. And then you get into future of work and how you roll out a new sort of workplace concept for close to 80,000 employees, and make sure that the experience that RBC employees is consistent, whether they're in London or Toronto or Sydney. So we've developed a lot of tools to help us kind of baseline what the standard operating structure will look like as we roll out spaces, or as employees sit in an office, no matter where that office is. And those services range from consistency in a base design, consistency in the operational expectations. So we've got very well drafted concierge type services mapped out. And no matter where you go, those concierge services will be the same. Making sure from all of the service lines that we run, whether it's facility management or project delivery or moves, adds, changes, there is an experience level that we're making sure or trying to attain, kind of minimum viable product, while also recognizing and making sure we're appreciating local nuances. And I think we've done that quite effectively, leveraging some of our prime architects when it comes to design specifically. So we've got sort of a base kit of parts, our base workplace guidelines. And actually over the past year, quite ironically, we had to develop a new kind of signage standard and roll out signage, whether it was arrows on floors or notifications on doors, hand washing reminders. I'm sure everyone's experienced that within their organizations. And just the local nuances around whether it was meters or feet, if it had to be 6 feet or it could be less. So, it's making sure that we're continuing to respect those local nuances, and making sure that, while it's an RBC based view, feeling, experience, that we're respecting also, the local cultures and the mini cultures that are required within those locations to make it impactful, and to make sure that those aren't kind of washed out, so to speak. So we've done a lot of work, to be honest, in that arena to make sure that the service delivery is consistent, and continue to evolve that. But it's a great question.
Thank you for a really clear answer, Lisa. And I'm interested in, actually, Sheila, you've overseen projects on a sort of wide sort of regional scale. Have you noticed a similar trend with some of your Occupy clients as what Lisa's just described?
Yes, totally. The notion of the human experience becomes everything. And so what I would say that the Canadian occupier marketplace has become increasingly sophisticated over the last 5 years. The notion of moving to agile workplaces, unassigned seating, offering concierge type services, focus on wellness and sustainability are all almost fundamentals of our designs, whether it's the largest occupiers of the banks, right through the Government of Canada, Province of Ontario, City of Toronto. Everybody's dialing this up in a substantial way in order to embrace opportunity. And in fact, I would say, I don't know, Lisa, your thoughts on this, but I think that Toronto is becoming one of the more leading meccas for some of these new designs globally. And I think that our focus on experience becomes everything, the punctuation mark, so to speak, on some of the trends.
Yeah, for sure, Sheila, I would completely agree with you. You know, we're just in the midst of meeting with a lot of other corporates to understand the hospitality concierge experience model. We had one pre-COVID, but I think, you know, employees coming in and knowing that the workplace is being consistently cleaned while they're there. I mean, pre-COVID, if you had janitorial service in an office environment while people were working, you'd receive 100 phone calls complaining about why is the janitorial service there while I'm at my desk. I think the opposite is now going to happen when people start coming back into the office. They're going to want to see physical evidence that the workplace is being maintained, that it's being cleaned regularly, whether that's once an hour, once every couple hours, especially in your amenity type spaces like your oasis, lunch rooms, large conferencing areas. You know, so that employee experience and what people are going to need to see and experience to be comfortable going back into the workplace is a huge priority right now for a lot of the corporates I'm talking to, Sheila, in Canada. Just trying to build that sort of best-in-class delivery model through things like health and safety certification, you know, publicizing some of the HVAC standards to employees who aren't in real estate or who aren't in facilities and previously didn't really care about what type of filter, what type of ASHRAE filter we were using. This is all now very topical and very, very important for our employees. So we're really leaning into a lot of that right now to make sure the model that we're developing, A, is consistent to your earlier point, Cristiano, and then also B, really is a best-in-class delivery so that when people do come in, they've got a really great experience, that they want to come back the next day, they feel confident in the workplace, and they're able to really get to the function and the job that they need to do and do that well. So it's a really important arena right now for sure.
And just to layer on top of that, that experience has to be the same whether they're remote or they're in the office. So therefore, you know, the virtual experience becomes everything. If I have a problem with my laptop, I need I need the solution. So whether I go to a physical place in the office building or I get an online experience. Similarly, you know, the meeting experience, now there's a disconnect. If you're physically in a room, you know, the virtual folks are different. So I know that various tech companies like Microsoft and IBM are working through that to make sure that there's a seamless experience while you're virtual or while you're physically in the room. Those are really important considerations as we navigate the physical environment as we move forward.
Thank you for that contribution, Lisa, because it's answered a question actually from Danny in our audience. You know, how we deal with a hybrid meeting. And I've had a number of hybrid meetings in the sort of late summer, early autumn of last year when there was a brief reopening of the industry in London. And there's no two ways about it. The people who were on the screen were second-class citizens in that meeting because the focus of the meeting was around the table, as it should be. And perhaps it's time for us as architects and for you as our colleagues and clients to reinvent, you know, the shape and format of the meeting room. You know, who says that the meeting rooms of the future need to be a rectangular table with a rectangular screen as we know them now? I think it's time to really reshape the space around the human experience. And it'll be interesting to see emerging designs and emerging technologies look to support that. We have another question on sustainability, and Lisa, you mentioned obviously it's a critical sort of aspect of, you know, of your corporate aspirations in terms of getting to net zero carbon and so on. How important do you think it is for developers to really push the envelope? I mean, clearly everyone is pushing the envelope now and looking to get the highest ratings. How do you see that relationship developing between the developer and the occupier?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, LEED certification, like platinum LEED, gold LEED, are becoming a requirement almost in buildings. It really is a selling feature, and it's not just about having the sticker on the door. It's really about seeing the investment is being made in the base building infrastructure components, it allows us to easily also apply LEED certification when we're doing our own fit outs within buildings that are advanced and sustainably advanced. So for us, it's a very big priority. It's only going to continue to increase in terms of visibility. Again, when you come back to the employees and the sophistication of employees now, you know, especially as you're looking at some of the younger generations coming into the workplace, they want to see this. They want to see that we're investing, that, you know, where possible, we're adopting, whether it's clean air, whether it's using sustainable products from and choosing vendors that provide that, sourcing locally. Like, there's just so many considerations now. And I think partnering with landlords and a lot of the institutional landlords, they get this. They're ahead of this. They've adopted it and they've been doing it for years, and they're only continuing to grow in sophistication in this arena. And to be honest, we rely on them a lot to learn about a lot of what these features mean, the value of them, the cost benefit of these investments. So I think it's going to continue to be a really big priority. I don't know, Sheila, if you had any other comments on that one.
So, years ago, I did some work with Civic Action looking at our Race to Reduce program in Toronto. And as we looked at the large occupiers and the large property owners, we were in sync, right? Because the governance models from the large occupiers said that we need a sustainability program. Now we need a health and wellness program. The real estate development community responded, did LEED Gold, Platinum, Silver buildings and interiors, and all that worked. Where there's two pain points I would suggest, and that is on the interiors, the facility management parts of buildings, how tenants actually use their spaces. Again, the larger occupiers, that's largely fine. It's rather the next level down becomes the topic. And it's like, you know, we have a whole conversation about, for example, plastic, but we all buy plastic water bottles when we go to the grocery store, or we buy juice bottles or whatever. So there's a bit of the disconnect in that place that I think is an opportunity for us to overcome. And it's really through the industry associations like NAIOP and BOMA and others that allow us to be able to embrace that.
Thank you very much, Sheila. So we have only a few minutes left, and I want to give Robin a moment to wrap up. But before we go, interestingly, you know, if you look at the last big pandemic, you know, in the Middle Ages in Europe, you know, ravaged for centuries, and then at the end of that, we had the Renaissance, and you know, a new era dawned across the modern world. Do you think we're at the start and on the brink of a new workplace renaissance? And perhaps Lisa and Sheila, if you think that, what does that look like?
Yeah, I'll go first and then I'll hand it over to you, Sheila. I really think we're really at a key point. And it's gonna, maybe take a year to get to the beginning of that renaissance. But you know, you think about the Roaring 20s, people want to get back out. That the video of Toronto that you flashed up at the beginning, I had a tear in my eye because it was just seeing the events, the culture, the vivacity of the city. People are going to want to get back together in the workplace to collaborate and to innovate collectively. So I really do believe we're at that point, maybe not right now, especially in the Toronto and Canadian market, but it's on the horizon. I can see it coming, and I think that's going to mean a lot to how we innovate in the workplace and the type of designs. And that's when I referenced, you know, we do need to get people back in and see what they need before we start to redesign spaces, because really employees are going to tell us what it is that they need to be effective and to be highly engaged. So hopefully we are, I believe we are, but Sheila, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Lisa. We're at an inflection point in workplace and the future of work, the future of the worker, and then the physical workplace. And so before COVID, you could argue that folks would be sitting at their desk processing paper from the left to the right of the desk. You know, that's how we worked, whether it's through paper or screens or whatever. Now we've realized that we're able to work anywhere, anytime, any place with anyone in any way that we want. So that means that the physical workplace has a whole opportunity to reimagine the value proposition to both the employer and the employee. And getting that right, that secret sauce, becomes absolutely everything for the future of workplace. And so calibrating toward that from both the developer perspective, those who lead the corporate real estate departments, to be able to provide the overall employee and client experience. And there's a whole sequencing through that. Getting it right will drive profitability, as I mentioned earlier, 4 times increase is what some of the examples have indicated.
Fantastic. Well, it's extremely exciting, I think, for all of us in this industry and in this sector, from occupiers to advisors to designers and engineers, everyone who makes it happen. I think we have an opportunity to, well, firstly have loads of fun over the next few years, shaping this new renaissance. We've got an opportunity to boost and help society get back on its feet, help the economy get back on its feet, and I think it'll be down to all of us to work together to make that happen. And perhaps that's a note for me to hand it back to you, Robin, and bring us to a close with maybe your thoughts and what's next for the BCO and in all this.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, Chris, Sheila, and Lisa. What a lively and interesting debate, and where you think the Office of the Future is heading, and what developers need to do to persuade you to take their space in their buildings. I was having I'm looking at your background, Sheila. You've got no suspended ceilings in there. Do we need raised floors? Is that something that's going to go? And when an occupier takes a building, do they want the shell, and then they create their own space and work with the developer on what they want to do with that space? It must always be remembered that you are the customer, and what the customer requests needs to be met. Chris, may I thank you personally for moderating this session so well. And I'm just going to go through our sponsors again for hanging out with us and looking after us over this torrid time. The gold sponsors, BDP Quadrangle, Gleeds, Lutron, Skanska, Troop Bywaters and Anders, Hare and WSP, all well and truly emblazoned behind me. And the silver sponsors, Darling Associate Architects, Paul Lee, HDR, Hurley Palmer Flat, Overbury, UNI, and Wembley Park. Thank you very much for your continued support. We're very grateful. I'd like to remind everybody that the next webinar of this trilogy of the Office Reimagined will take place on Thursday the 29th at 2:30 GMT UK time, where we're going to hear from some key people from the UK and Canada. And this webinar is titled "The Office, the City, Taking or Giving a Sense of Place." It should be a fascinating one because it's all about what the office, where it should be, and what should be happening outside the office to entice people back and to a better standard of living and enjoyment of going to the office and being part of people's environment. Till then, I'd wish you all well and thank my panel again for giving us such a fabulous insight on their thoughts. And we'll see where things go in the future. And a renaissance, let's hope it happens and happens quick. So thank you and have a great day. I know it's morning for you in Canada. You have a great day. We're halfway through ours and we'll probably be having a cup of tea shortly. So thank you so much and take care.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.